Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 41, Come Here and Write a Novel. Natsume Soseki waited for a few seconds, and as he predicted, the footsteps outside approached steadily, without any panic. Based on his analysis, Komaeda Nagito's personality tends to be naturally obedient. No matter how strange, shocking, or troubling the situation is, he can remain calm, even joyfully accepting it. A few seconds later, the owner of the room pushed open the slightly closed door. Natsume Soseki casually put down the book in his hand. It was his novel Komaeda Nagito has bought. He was a bit curious about what Komaeda Nagito would write in his own book, so he flipped through it, only to find that surprisingly, nothing was written inside. Was it because the book was meant to be stored, and thus was carefully preserved? Natsume Soseki couldn't quite understand. Actually, it was simply because when reading Natsume Soseki's novel, Komaeda Nagito wouldn't get distracted, and naturally wouldn't scribble random things in the book. In summary, when he was reading his own novel, Komaeda Nagito had returned, considering all aspects of the investigation that could display Komaeda Nagito's admiration towards himself. Natsume Soseki remained quite calm, without immediately turning into a cat and running away. After all, this time he came to find Komaeda Nagito to resolve some of his own doubts, and running away simply wouldn't solve the problem. It's just that this kind of illegal intrusion of his will likely make Komaeda Nagito's favorability towards him drop quite a bit. But since there are still other forces monitoring this house, he have no proper way to visit formally. Komaeda Nagito's gaze swept around the room, seemingly observing if anything had been moved. Although in the eyes of the other party, he was likely already an illegal intruder, Natsume Soseki still tried to justify himself. This old man was only checking to see if there were any eavesdropping devices in your house, and afterward, I only glanced at your books. I see. Komaeda Nagito smiled at Natsume Soseki. Thanks, don't worry, I'm not angry. I guess the reason you didn't use the front door was to avoid those eyes outside, right? Natsume Soseki. This response seems somewhat off. Is this really the reaction someone should have after discovering that their home has been illegally invaded? Yet, they even helped him find a good excuse. What if he turned out to be a bad person? However, this reaction suggests that another of his guesses might be correct. Natsume Soseki, out of courtesy, took off his small round hat and then used his cane to stand up. I thought you might roughly know who I am. Ah. Komaeda Nagito's smile grew broader, and his grayish-blue eyes swirled with a manic joy. His voice lowered slightly, carrying a faint tremor as if holding back excitement. Natsume-sensei. You really do know. Natsume Soseki sighed. Komaeda Nagito seemed under emotional pressure, trying to keep himself from getting too excited, but the flush of blood on his pale cheeks still showed his intense inner state, so the calico cat just now was actually Natsume-sensei. I'm sorry, because calico cats all look quite similar, the worthless me couldn't immediately recognize your wisdom. If there is a next time, I will prepare some nice dried fish. Natsume Soseki, no, there's no need for that. When he was outside in his cat form, seeing that Komaeda Nagito had no reaction upon seeing him, he thought that the other person actually didn't know that deeply, but it turned out it was only because he couldn't distinguish between calico cats. Natsume Soseki vaguely realized that Komaeda Nagito had this mysterious ability to instinctively draw people into his vortex of words, unconsciously leading them off topic, so he decisively chose to get straight to the point. Since you already know my identity, then I'll ask directly, how did you recognize me? Komaeda Nagito tilted his head. A guess? Natsume Soseki said seriously, this old man bears no ill will, I just wants to confirm something. Komaeda Nagito smiled silently and began to ponder how exactly he should answer this question. No way, he just guessed. If Natsume-sensei doesn't believe him, what else can he do? He guessed rather casually, far from being as meticulous as investigating a murder case in another world. First of all, it was when he went out that he saw that calico cat. Cats actually have their own territory, and he had never seen a calico cat near his house. But considering it looked rather, well-fed, he could temporarily rule out it being a stray cat. It was possibly a house cat that had run out or a free-roaming pet. Next, his house's anti-theft system. After encountering thieves several times, the Tei Corporation's insurance company specifically hired experts to customize it. Even Dazai-Osamu would probably need quite some time to pick the lock, not to mention that all the entry points were secured, and before leaving the house, he made sure to lock everything up properly. Upon returning, there was no sign of anything wrong with the door. If there was anything unusual, it would only be the half-open bathroom window. After all, a normal person's body definitely wouldn't be able to fit through it, and in a short time, it was also difficult to pry open. Even the last time he was kidnapped, they only managed to get in after searching him for the key. Otherwise, their attempts to force open the security door or window would have caused enough commotion for the neighbors to call the police. When he returned, there was no sign of anything wrong from the outside of the house. In other words, the intruder had entered peacefully, meaning it was most likely an ability user, or else he hadn't found any vulnerability. Originally, he thought it could be anyone, but as soon as he stepped inside and saw the uninvited guest take off his hat, revealing hair of a peculiar color similar to that of a calico cat, holding a Natsume Soseki book in his hands. Considering that Dazai-Osamu had once told him, his ability is called No Longer Human, which shares the same name as the work of another world's Dazai-sensei, Komaeda Nagito almost instantly had a guess in his heart. This person might very well be Natsume Soseki, and his ability is probably called I Am a Cat. The other party also had a, you definitely know who I am, look on their face, so Komaeda Nagito simply stated his guess outright. Seeing the other party's reaction, he knew he had guessed correctly. This is this world's Natsume Soseki. Even though it's a different world, he's still striving to write, using words to guide people's hearts, a great literary figure. What a sparkling hope this is. Calm down, calm down. This is not like those classmates of his. Even if he said something strange that wasn't accepted, everyone's activity range is so coincidentally large that sooner or later, they'd run into each other. This one here is a big name. If he said something wrong that made the other never want to see him again, then meeting again would be a bit troublesome. Komaeda Nagito's head was filled with all thoughts of praises for Natsume Soseki, and for a moment, he couldn't figure out where to start explaining. However, in truth, Natsume Soseki saw Komaeda Nagito's silent demeanor and thought that he didn't want to answer, so he sighed and said, just assume you're guessing. Then, regarding this, do you also want to say that you guessed? Natsume Soseki turned Komaeda Nagito's Japanese language textbook to the page where it was written, I am a cat, Natsume Soseki, and stared at Komaeda Nagito's expression without blinking. Komaeda Nagito blinked. Ah, I see, so that's it. He guessed it correctly again. This world's Natsume Soseki's ability is indeed called I am a cat, otherwise, there wouldn't be such a reaction from the other party. Natsume-sensei, please rest assured, I won't reveal your ability. Komaeda Nagito immediately began to express his loyalty, placing a hand on his chest, as if he wanted to dig out his own heart to show the other person, his eyes burning as he looked towards Natsume Soseki. A small, powerless piece of trash like me should have nothing to do with your world, so when I wrote those words, I never thought I would cause you trouble. I swear, from now on, if I ever got distracted again, I will definitely check once more, and destroy anything I shouldn't have written. If you are not at ease, I am willing to become your stepping stone, whether it means killing me, imprisoning me, or some other method, I can accept it all. Natsume Soseki listened to these words, outwardly still maintaining composure and calmness, but in reality, he was already somewhat astonished inside. Huh? Is this what you all concluded as broad-minded? Is the special division currently just drawing lots for passing candidates? Just how much of a mistake in their work would it take to reach this kind of result? While Natsume Soseki was momentarily speechless due to his shock, unsure of what to say, Komaeda Nagito continued his endless chatter. I initially thought I would be kidnapped again, but to my surprise, it's actually Natsume-sensei. Today, I'm truly too lucky. Even if I immediately become paralyzed, it would make sense. No need to make sense this kind of thing. Before you leave, please sign for me. I've always really admired Natsume-sensei, and I promise I'll keep the autograph safe, although perhaps this house will burn down and conveniently destroy the autograph, but I still want to have a piece of this world sensei's autograph, since I never got one before. Don't use the possibility of the house burning down as a basis for deciding whether you want an autograph or not. Huh. Wait, this world? Natsume Soseki, who had always found himself unable to chime in, and didn't know what to say, suddenly caught onto the key point and finally could open his mouth. This world, what do you mean by that? Komaeda Nagito smoothly broke away from his fluent speech, tilting his head with an innocent expression. Weren't you asking me how I knew the name of your ability? Natsume Soseki stared sharply at Komaeda Nagito for a few seconds. After escaping from the other's mind-boggling words, he regained his ability to think and quickly started going through the information in his head, soon guessing something. You have memories of another world. Komaeda Nagito nodded with a smile. As expected of Natsume-sensei, you caught the key point so quickly. Reaching this conclusion, Natsume Soseki could hardly believe it. Komaeda Nagito's information. Well, not mentioning the personality aspect, at least regarding who he has interacted with since childhood, what he has gone through, all of it has been thoroughly investigated, and there's truly nothing that could give him the chance to know such classified intel. Moreover, after he asked for Komaeda Nagito's information yesterday, people from the special division contacted other departments, conducted another investigation on Komaeda Nagito, and confirmed the authenticity of the information. There was no fabrication, and the personal details matched perfectly. This only made Natsume Soseki even less able to understand how the other party managed to obtain his information. He even knows his real name. What else is there to say? This kid definitely has issues. Unfortunately, even Natsume Soseki can't do anything about Komaeda Nagito's information. No flaws can be found at all, only guessing it was a coincidence. Perhaps, during that recordless incident, the other person unintentionally learned something about him. These words, even if spoken by a 3-year-old child, wouldn't necessarily be believed. If not for being certain that Dazai Osamu, the ability nullification person, had interacted with Komaeda Nagito several times without anything unusual, he would even suspect whether someone had used an ability to possess this child. Komaeda Nagito himself currently came up with something entirely new, an idea that he had never considered before. Another world. Special abilities exist, but a parallel world, huh? Natsume Soseki accepted it rather quickly, but although this explanation could clarify all doubts, it couldn't immediately convince him. New evidence was needed. If he were that easily convinced, he wouldn't have survived until now. Komaeda Nagito, seeing Natsume Soseki seemingly deep in thought, stepped lightly over and pulled out his desk chair. Please have a seat. I'm sorry the living room is a bit messy. Would you like me to make some tea for you? Natsume Soseki sat down but gracefully declined the tea. No, you should sit too, we really need to talk for a bit. This room had only one chair, so Komaeda Nagito obediently sat on the bed beside it. Considering Komaeda Nagito's attitude towards him, Natsume Soseki didn't bother with further formalities and spoke directly. I need to confirm a few questions, can you answer me? Of course. When dealing with Natsume Soseki, who undoubtedly shone brightly in the literary world, Komaeda Nagito's attitude was even more enthusiastic compared to dealing with Oda Sakanosuke, Amuro Toru, and Dazai Osamu. His face was filled with willingness to answer any questions asked. Of course, this is also because Komaeda Nagito is well aware that if Natsume Soseki's ability is really "I am a cat," then he necessarily needs to come up with a reasonable explanation for why he knows. Natsume-sensei's gaze is so insightful, filled with the light of wisdom. Being able to know what he wrote in the Japanese language textbook means that the other party's intel network is also very powerful, far from just being a simple novelist. Komaeda Nagito doesn't believe that his insignificant existence could successfully deceive the other party. Natsume Soseki pondered for a few seconds and first chose a less critical question. The excerpts you've written in your notes and books, are any of them from another world of mine? Komaida Nagito immediately picked up the books, flipping through them, occasionally pausing to show something to the other, and then searched for the next passage. Natsume Soseki nodded while silently making judgments in his mind. It was the same as he had guessed when he read those passages before. Only now he knew, this wasn't someone imitating his writing, but rather, it was genuinely from a different version of himself. Besides, if anyone in this world, even if they were imitating his style, could write with such depth of thought, they would have already become famous. Which one do you like best? Natsume Soseki asked. Komaida Nagito picked one at random. He had once mentioned this very quote to Dazai Osamu, this one. In the world, even if there's just one thing that's good, it's necessary to find something that can capture your own heart, something grand, beautiful, or kind. Looking at these words, recalling Komaida Nagito's life of constant gains and losses, never able to hold on to anything, Natsume Soseki instantly shared the same thought as Dazai Osamu. It's a quote you'd like. As long as there is a goal, you can continue to survive. Natsume Soseki closed his book and continued to ask, do you only have memories of a different timeline, or is there another situation? Komaida Nagito then explained that the moment he opened his eyes, he found himself kidnapped and trapped in a warehouse. Due to various reasons, he did not explain everything clearly, leaving out most of the truth, and roughly mentioned his own situation regarding the staged suicide scene. That's how it is. I originally thought I might die or perhaps be rescued, but unexpectedly, I ended up in another world. He spoke calmly, but Natsume Soseki broke out in a cold sweat after hearing this. Although he spoke in a simplified manner, still. Suicide is even made this complicated, so eagerly looking forward to the next progress, isn't there already a huge problem with yourself? Natsume Soseki made some guesses in his mind about Komaida Nagito's purpose for suicide, and finally had some understanding of the concept behind this child's madness. So, earlier, this child said he wanted to be a stepping stone. If he wants to keep it confidential, even if it means killing him, it doesn't matter. He is serious. In a way, a mad person is even harder to deal with than someone who stops at nothing. Natsume Soseki became even more cautious in his attitude towards Komaida Nagito. Come, tell me about that world of yours, Natsume Soseki said, realizing he was being too vague, and then added, for example, are there people like me in that world of yours, and what differences are there compared to your world? Komaida Nagito sighed, if I had to say, a lot of people have switched professions. Originally, everyone was a literary figure like Natsume-sensei, but up until now, I've only seen you, Natsume-sensei, Conan Doyle. Ah, there's one more person I just recently got to know who's starting to write novels. The others? Natsume Soseki was puzzled, and he asked as an example, your friend, Dazai Osamu, is also a literary figure? He's not my friend, but yes, that's right. Komaida Nagito said, Dazai-kun is indeed a very famous literary author, though it's a pity he currently has no intention of writing anything. What about Moriogai? Of course, he is too. Then, do you know Amuro Toru? Ah, no, I haven't heard of him or seen him in another world. Natsume Soseki felt he might be grasping a pattern. He glanced at Komaida Nagito's bookshelf and took out a book. What about this one? Komaida Nagito glanced at it and realized it was by an author he felt, apart from Kudo Yusaku, was the best writer of detective novels in Japan, Kindaichi. No, the other world doesn't have an author named Kindaichi. Komaida Nagito hesitated for a moment and said, but if we're only talking about Kindaichi, it makes me think of another author named Yokomizo Seishi. There's no mistake. Natsume Soseki put the book back on the shelf, seeming lost in thought. The person behind the pen name, Kindaichi, he just so happened to know the real name of the person, which was Yokomizo Seishi. If Kindaichi is the pen name of the other world's Yokomizo Seishi, then wouldn't your first reaction be to guess his true identity? Natsume Soseki questioned. If it's not a pen name, then why would you think of Yokomizo Seishi because of Kindaichi? Komaida Nagito smiled, tilting his head, because the best novel series he had written, the protagonist named was Kandaichi A. Natsume Soseki's expression became even more serious. He asked a few more names, along with their representative works, then slowly nodded, I understand. Even if it's another world, it has a mysterious connection to this one. If he wanted to make use of this connection, Komaeda Nagito's existence would be too important. Natsume Soseki tapped on the table, looked at Komaeda Nagito, assessing him in his mind, and made a decision. Komaeda-kun, I am willing to trust you. I hope you can agree to a request of mine. The intel report has proven that Komaeda Nagito is innocent, so it's possible to trust him more and involve him more deeply. What's the request? Komaeda Nagito happily clasped his hands in front of his chest, his eyes flashing with excitement. As long as I can help Natsume-sensei, no matter what it is, I can do it. Natsume Soseki had a cold sweat drop down the back of his head, feeling that while this child could be trusted, his personality was still a bit of an issue. Everything would have to be taken slowly. You said you can recall a book you read from another world, but it would give you a headache, right? Yeah. Komaeda Nagito seemed to understand something. I can be patient. Someone as useless as me, it's already difficult enough to be able to help Natsume-sensei in a rush, so please don't worry about me. Natsume Soseki looked at Komaeda Nagito with a bit of guilt. Knowing well that this child's life was already in shambles, he not only couldn't find a way to help but was also making the situation even more painful for him. But for Yokohama, for everyone's future, he had no choice but to do this. If Komaeda-kun wanted to resent him in the future, he could come to him. Komaeda-kun, about this person. Natsume Soseki moved the Japanese language textbook, picked up the notebook underneath, flipped to a certain page, and presented it to Komaeda Nagito. Just to ask, do you know his full name? Komaeda Nagito nodded, Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. Very good. Natsume Soseki asked, did he write a lot in another world? About 10 or so books. Komaeda Nagito, although he had some guesses about Natsume Soseki's identity, wasn't sure what he was asking for. I've read around 7 or 8 of them. In that case, I'd like to ask a favor of you, Natsume Soseki said seriously. Take the novels you've read that he wrote and rewrite each one. I know there might be a lot of words, but I don't need them completed. Just write the beginning of each one, about 60 or 70,000 characters per book, enough for one book to be published. Komaeda Nagito pondered, would that help you? It will. Natsume Soseki said, these books will be published overseas in the future, and maybe even the author themselves will be able to see them. If Komaeda Nagito wrote the book under the same name as the one with that special ability, even signing it with his own name, then Dostoevsky would definitely shift his attention to the person who wrote those books. Komaeda Nagito would absolutely be protected, and no ordinary person would suspect that the true author is just a junior high student. In this way, even if the opponent wanted to investigate, they would only find the decoy they had set up, allowing the target to become even more focused. At that point, if they wanted to track the opponent's movements again, it would definitely be much better than before. Even if it meant relying on luck, what if it worked? I understand. Komaeda Nagito's eyes sparkled, I will write it. Natsume Soseki asked, by the way, what books of his have you read? Komaeda Nagito listed a string of book titles. Natsume Soseki pondered for a moment, considering Komaeda Nagito's luck, and asked, which one do you want to write first? Crime and Punishment? It really sounded like an ability name. Natsume Soseki decisively clapped his hands, then start with that one. Chapter 41 End.